Here with Will Mukey. We're live. Hey everybody, Trade to Black podcast. What a day it's been. It's all this beautiful technology, but we're learning as we go. But the most important is that we're creating content, as I've got my beautiful Phil Donahue microphone here. But we're going to go live here. Phil Mukey, Will Mukey, my apologies, from Artemis Growth Partners. Can we start over again? Anyways.
We're here. Call me Phil. It's fine.
Good to see you, Will. How are things?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks, John.
Good. You joined the dark side. You came over to North America from Europe.
You know, if this is the dark side, we've been in the dark side since we started. So we started here in North America.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, everything that's happening in the space, we actually still like the U.S. market. We're not doing a lot of investment here. Our investment focus is really Europe right now.
Yep.
But the companies that we invested in back in 2018, 2019 are cash flow positive. They have great market share. They're growing. So we're actually pretty sanguine because the demand is here. It's a huge market with a lot of demand. We just have a terrible regulatory environment.
So who were some of the companies early on that you invested in where you're starting to see some of that positive outcome you're starting to come to fruition 5-6 years later now?
So, I mean, we started early on with Kiva, now Kiva Edibles, Kiva Confections. And we invested, I think, as a firm, $7 million at a $23 million pre back in 2018.
Okay.
That's now, you know, it has a significant market cap, privately, cash flow positive business, and a really great sort of traction with the end consumer. So it's one of our kind of poster children for what's done well.
Yep.
We're also in Raw Garden, which is Central Coast Agriculture. We're in Cannes. So we played the brand business early on, and those businesses we've been able to continue to fund until they got to cash flow break even, now cash flow positivity.
Yep.
And they're really sort of the darlings of the space.
Yeah.
So we were, I guess, smart and lucky at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a major part of the investing theme moving forward in the United States is brand, because brand's going to be able to command price stability. If anything, is we've seen a major theme of being price compression moving forward.
So look, I think brand in the early days was really hard because state to state, there was no recognition. You could be the biggest brand in California, and the next state that legalized, they had never heard of you. So actually, it was great. Like Rusty and Old Pal did a great job.
Yeah.
They do merch before they put their brand in. They sort of send in the Air Force before they send the ground troops. I think now, especially with hemp and the ubiquity, I mean, THC is legalized under the 2018 Farm Bill. And you can sell through a hemp channel anywhere in the US, and we're seeing the MSOs making that move into hemp-derived products. So brand, I think, is becoming resonant. But you still have an interesting consumer base. I think brand has to be authentic to work. Like, you have to have a voice and a narrative and a connection with your end consumer. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of PowerPoint slides.
And on the converse, is there brand power in Europe, or is it more so, obviously patient first, it's a medically driven market? Are brands present even within the market?
There are brands that have entered the market, but I would say that the dynamic in Europe right now, because it is a 100% medical product, it's not sold the same way it is here. So it's a medical market, not a consumer market. Even though there are brands there, I think that the way that things are being priced in the cash pay space is still almost $1 per milligram of THC. And so there's not as much resonance. I'm interested to see how folks like cookies that are coming to the market are going to play out. But I think in reality, it comes down to what the flower is primarily, what the terpene profile is, how people are buying it, and the price versus the potency.
So where are we today? You know, that's a bold move for you to leave North America, go to Europe. When did all that happen? How many years ago?
So we actually started investing in Europe all the way back in 2018.
Okay.
And we did it because we thought, actually we didn't think. We didn't really know where these markets were going. We knew that Europe was going to be a different market
That's early.
than the US. And we started with a company called Valcon Medical, which was our investment in Denmark. And we did that because it was actually the founders of Vitalis, the supercritical CO2 extraction machine manufacturer. They were setting up this business in Denmark. And again, we didn't really know where the markets were going, so we thought it was a natural hedge. And here we are, fast forward. Europe is still a very small part of the overall portfolio.
But it's garnering a lot of attention.
It's growing, and it doesn't have the overhead encumbrances that the US market has, because we have full federal legality in Germany.
Right.
The move from cannabis being considered a narcotic to a non-narcotic status has just cracked open that market large. And even though they're small dollars compared to, the US is at 40 billion legal sales for cannabis products. On the regulated side, 20 billion for hemp. The whole European theater is probably 2 to 3 billion euro. But Germany is probably $1 billion of that. And it's growing, this year, This year, they'll probably do 150 tons of imported cannabis into Germany. That's up from 70 tons last year, 30 tons the year before, 20 tons the year before that. So the curve on the demand side is really validating the opportunity.
So I think for our viewers, like a lot of the great interviews that we're having about the European market are contacts from you and Stanton, and it's been great so far. A lot of stuff we learned, including last week about how we found out that there's no kickbacks for doctors when they're prescribing, opioids and stuff like that. So there's no middle people that are getting in the way, and common sense, as I said before, is prevailing. So we've seen 250,000 to an estimated million.
1 million or so, yeah.
Where do you see that going in the next 12 to 24 months? There's numbers that are speculating, could be 5 million, could be as many as 9 eventually. Like, how big can Germany get?
I mean, we're taking a more conservative approach because we're actually out talking to investors, and we don't want to overcook the market. But we see that, from 250 to 1 million, that was just the first part of the curve. When we look at the actual embedded demand base in Germany, take Germany alone, 84 million people, likely between 7 and 10 million sort of long-term self-prescribing patients. And they're really not consumers. They're not like buying cannabis to go on a one-time, Saturday night. They're habitually using it on a daily basis to basically medicate whatever the underlying medical condition is that they have. And they're now moving very simply from an unregulated illegal market where they don't know where the product is. It's been convenient and it's been cheap, but they now have the same convenience and the same, if not even cheaper product coming out of the legal market that has higher quality, it's tested, and in some cases is reimbursed. So that's
the big thing.
So the move is, if say a third of the market is fully reimbursed and say 2/3 is cash pay, that sort of private pay base is really just taking a lower quality, more dangerous product, supplementing that with a higher quality legal product at the same price or lower price. So when do we hit 5 million patients or 7 million patients? It's probably some years away, but can we go from 1 million to 2 or 1 million to 3 patients? 1 million to 3 million patients? Yeah, I think we can do that.
When we're thinking about Europe, everyone's mind goes straight to Germany. Thematically, where are you looking for the puck to go next? Or where should people be thinking of in terms of jurisdictions?
So let's start by saying that 21 of 27 EU member states already have some form of federally legal medical access to cannabis. And again, Europe is going to be an entirely medical-only market, which really to the end sort of self-prescribing patient or consumer, it just means you have to go to get your script before you get your cannabis. It also means that you likely have a reduced modality. So unlike the US where you have every single form of cannabis, you have flower and oil. But we see that, Germany is kind of the engine on the train, but we have very large markets like France that are going to be enacting their fully state-backed medical program starting in 26. It's already been passed from a pilot program to a permanent program. We have smaller countries like Denmark and the Czech Republic that are 5 million, 4 million people, but are moving already into medical. Actually, the Czech Republic wants to do something more quasi-adult use. So when you aggregate all of the population of Europe, it's really 740 million people. It's a huge
really
addressable
big
market. And you don't need a lot of penetration to make a really robust opportunity for both investment and for operators.
So when we look, a lot of these companies are private and investors can't get involved in that. But when we see the exporting opportunities, if you're an investor in North America and you look at that European market, like what companies would you say have good upside potential here in the short term?
I mean, we were just talking about some of the players that are already in Europe or already making inroads into Europe. So Organigram has cash that's coming from BAT. They've already made investments and they're already exporting into Germany. But there's some really cool businesses. I mean, Village Farm, I think, was a great transformation. Super smart team.
Great story.
Great story and a huge opportunity. And they have really great flower and other products that they can partner with to sort of crack that European theater. So I think those two are already sort of in the mix. You look at the Canadian players, some of the guys that are already exporting through their own channels into Germany. But I'd say that, the smarter of the US MSOs, they view Europe as almost like a 10th state. So if they go through their roster and they talk about, the largest guys coming down, Germany now shows up as part of like where I need to be. And I can't talk about names, but we've already seen a lot of those MSOs already working through the names in Europe as a potential shopping list for either partnership or acquisition.
Be a nice 84 million people medical market opening up in the U.S. right now, would it not, Anthony?
It'd be nice. I mean, in terms of investability, you obviously started in the U.S., investing in Europe currently. What do you see as being investable in the U.S. moving forward? Obviously, thematically, I wouldn't as much as people might not agree with this, I wouldn't say that an MSO model right now is investable. Are you looking more so for brands, more so for, let's say, biotech or something that can be pharmaceutically driven moving forward? Like,
I'll speak specifically to our strategy, which is right now we're not investing in the U.S. We said that the capital that we have, first of all, it's kind of late dated capital because our first funds were started in 2018 and 2019, so we're kind of at the end of the investment cycle already and looking to monetize. So we're really supporting the businesses that we've already been in. But when I look at the U.S., I still think that there are opportunities state to state, being a local operator. I worry about folks that are setting up high cost cultivation assets, any sort of big iron in the ground. Like when we get rescheduling, when we get sort of the right worlding of U.S. cannabis, I don't see those guys making money. Especially if we actually get right worlding where you can start importing cannabis from other jurisdictions to the U.S. I mean, I sit on the board of a company, was public on the NASDAQ, now is private, but Clever Leaves. Yeah. And we're growing, at a reduced capacity and fully loaded overhead at less than $0.50 per gram. And if you run that at scale, it's like cents on the dollar, like a nickel per gram. And I even look at CCA at Raw Garden. They can do cannabis in the ground in the U.S. at very low cost. So if you're talking about state to state, don't do big iron. I'm looking for asset light models. I'm looking at businesses, again, on the brand side that have authenticity. Like pick your demographic, pick your affinity group, and mine that affinity group for your market, and then find someone that already has the built-in either MCO opportunities or a large MSO, and let them supply your product for your brand. So focus on narrative, on story, on affinity, on connection. I mean, 80% of the market right now is still kind of the legacy OG market, and they're buying on a $1 per milligram basis, and it's a really big market. But if you think about where the puck is going, you want to talk about the market of the people that haven't even stepped their first foot into a dispensary. Right. And how do you bridge the gap? How do you break down the stigma? How do you open the doorway to say, cannabis on an adult use basis is just like any other libation. It's even like nicotine or alcohol. So why not?
Hemp's doing that job for us right now. Right. Unfortunately, it's facing a ban, and we might see some rollback. But hemp is that Trojan horse right now, getting that curious consumer.
What do you make of this right now about hemp?
So look, I think taking a step back, first of all, there should never be an internecine battle between regulated cannabis and hemp. Like there should be harmonization and dialogue as to how the industry, as an entire industry, hemp and regulated cannabis, can be a responsible counterparty to government. Because right now, government looks at this space and sort of says, your children fighting in the playpen. So until we kind of, have maturity as our endpoint goal, we're going to have a bit of a mess trying to deal with government. But I think that hemp has been a great boon for cannabis. There shouldn't be a lot of discord with the regulated market looking at hemp. If anything, there's probably more of a, I wish I had that, because they've created a $20 billion industry in 18 months. So it's been super fast growth. It's just tapping into the natural demand that's already in the US.
What's the biggest difference when it comes to government officials in various countries in Europe compared to the US? We have an idea, but you have these conversations. What comes to mind?
I mean, the biggest difference is belief versus data. So the US is a belief-oriented society. You can give them as much data as they want, and they will still go with belief first. So it takes a long time to convert belief into actual data and science. The Europeans are the opposite. They eschew belief, and they only go to data. And so what I thought was really interesting about the legalization process in Germany when CanG came into play, so April 1st, 2024, cannabis was no longer a narcotic. And that was a multi-year odyssey of getting through all of the different political parties. And at that time, the government was a coalition of ultra-left, sort of conservative right, and middle of the road, kind of, halfway in, halfway out, almost Democrats of Germany. And the reality is that the CanG laws played to both the sort of liberalization of the plant, but it really spoke to safety and controls. And so the harm reduction aspect of legalizing cannabis was such a big data card that the CDU, the Conservative Party of Germany, could stand behind. And again, that's like a group of people that have very divergent beliefs, but all converged on data. And if we did the same in the US, we'd be in a completely different place. I just, as an individual, I don't understand it. I vote for people. No one does,
except the very few select baby boomers from the US.
Because it is true, and I hate to say that they deny it, but they deny the data in the US. They let.
They look, beyond the data, or they try and twist the data to a story rather than the story fits the data. It's the data. They want the data to fit the story. So
What's that say about America?
I love America. I'm American. I live in London, but I love the U.S.
But I mean, pertaining to this industry, can you imagine we're in 2025 and we're still talking about belief versus actual data?
You know, the reality is we're a storyteller nation. Like we've been a storyteller all of our history. Our entire existence is because we're storytellers. So we love the narrative. This is why Hollywood is so important around the world. It tells stories. But at some point in time, especially when it comes to government, we need to stop telling stories. We need to go to the hard data, because in the end, the right story is data-based, because that's what unlocks the issues on social justice. It's what unlocks the issues on healthcare and reform. It creates opportunity. And the fact that we have, you know, what was it, 2023 was 426,000 permanent jobs in cannabis.
Yeah.
And over 15 billion of cumulative state-based tax revenue. Like, why don't we just bring that into the full legal roster, claim those jobs, claim that growth, claim that tax revenue, and claim an industry that's growing at 20% a year? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
but we have a lot of education to do.
If they rescheduled, I think there'd be a lot of stories that could be produced based off of that. But
I agree.
I think that's the big takeaway right now. And really why a lot of people, and especially as we talked about in the past, in a few other interviews earlier today, about the upside potential of some of these Canadian LPs right now based on the exporting opportunities, because common sense is prevailing. They're looking at data and they're not getting in the way over in countries like Germany, which is why this is what we need as an industry. We need more markets to come online and grow. We see the potential, but that's a big takeaway from what you just said.
Agreed.
All right, sir. What's in store for the rest of the day?
Going to listen to a couple more panels, prepare for my own panel tomorrow, and meet a lot of people. I mean, the great thing about Benzinga is it is a nodal point for the industry, and so kind of everyone you want to meet is here.
Yeah.
And so this is like, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a couple of months worth of meetings all in one day.
Look, Benzinga is still a really big show, but when we think about some of the trade shows that are taking over in Europe, kind of reminds us of the early days of cannabis here in North America. Yeah. So we've got Mary Jane coming out, followed by Cannabis Europa in a little bit, a week and a half. How big was ICBC?
It was really big. It was actually surprisingly big. And I think that what I found very interesting is ICBC this year, of all years, was a true B2B play. And we had, like Charlie was there, Charlie Bachtell from Cresco. We had US MSOs playing, we had international companies. It wasn't just sort of the finite German market talking to itself. And so it became kind of a global center of discussion. I worried about, someone said to me, the worry was about ICBC is that there weren't enough sort of sad faces in the room. Like everyone was really euphoric. And I think there's a lot of reason for that, but you do want to have balance. But ICBC was really well attended because Germany is open, Europe is open, that gateway is open. And we just need more people to understand and believe that. And we have conversations with investors, and I'm like, this is the best time to be investing in cannabis. You don't have anyone in the stock market. I mean, if you're going to take a long-term punt on cannabis, buy now, because companies are still trading at 1 to 2 times revenue, and yet they're multi-billion-dollar businesses with hundreds of millions of dollars of free cash flow. And all you need to do is have patience to wait for something to change, and they should be valued at what a CPG company would be valued at, or a medical company would be valued at.
Well said, well said.
So I think it's a great time to be investing, and on the private side, there are so many opportunities and so many different plays. So again, a lot of long faces if you're an operator and you're kind of running out of cash, because it has been a very difficult environment to raise cash, especially for private. But for the rest of the industry, I think the fact that we are having these discussions, the fact that frankly, it's a terrible thing that what Texas is trying to do to hemp, but it puts a spotlight on what's going on in cannabis. And I'm hoping it will be a watershed moment for us to come together and say, it's a real market, like let's fix the consumer side. And my hope is let's fix the medical side.
Yeah.
Because medical in the US is a tax rebate. It's not a true medical indication. And there's another $100 billion industry when you talk about pipeline development and real kind of specialty pharma compounds that go into indications that treat disease better than traditional pharma.
Yeah,
and that's a huge category to open up that's closed here in the US.
Data Talk with Will, not Phil Muki from Artemis Growth Partners.
Call me anything you want.
I know, I'm not going to do that. Listen, always appreciate the guests that you line us up with and shedding light on why there's so much positive momentum building in the European market. But most importantly, enjoy the rest of your trip. Let's keep in touch, okay?
Yeah, pleasure.
All right, Will Muki from Artemis Growth Partners. That wraps up. Frank Colombo is going to come on with us in just a moment, so make sure you stick around. We're going to talk about this restructuring with Air Wellness, and if you are a shareholder, what this might mean for you moving forward. So that's coming up in just a minute. So we'll be right back. Test 1. We good? Albert, speak real quick. He's good? Okay. We're live. Hey, everybody. Trade to Black podcast back here in Chicago. Didn't realize we were on air, but hey, we're always learning and making some mistakes. But you know what? Progress, not perfection. Here with Alberto Parados. You got to say it a little bit slower, but anyways, CFO of SNDL. Good to see you. Here's a name we've heard a few times, but how are you enjoying the conference so far?
So far, so good. Quite a lot of people, a few investors, a few partners, U.S. companies, European companies.
Yeah,
expanding the network.
So from your perspective, being CFO, last couple of years, you guys have gone for a big transformation from cannabis only to now a diversified platform with alcohol as well. In your opinion, like, what's this transformation been like? You know, what's been the biggest challenge, but how are you, I guess, set up to succeed moving forward based on the transformation of the last couple of years?
Right. I would say that one of the biggest challenges is probably changing our own culture, setting a different type of ambition. A lot of companies in Canada, they are just fighting for survival. I think if you set yourself that type of ambition, you will probably make it sometimes, but most of the time you will fail. If you set your ambition a little bit higher, I think that you start seeing many different opportunities. That's why I think when we change that type of perspective, we're starting to see a bunch of opportunities in front of us. Clearly, our differentiation is the vertically integrated model. We are one of the few, if not the only, large player in Canada that is vertically integrated. We have over $200 million of cash at our disposal, so we're not fighting for day-to-day survival. We can make decisions based on what is right for the long term and for our shareholders. And that has been transformational.
Did you by chance bring Prime Minister Mark Carney here to Chicago and take him out to a steakhouse tonight to talk about this excise tax?
Not necessarily, but actually we think that excise taxes, literally it's a pain for a lot of players, but it's the same for everybody, right? So I think we have demonstrated that you can make money even paying excise taxes as an LP.
Well, here at our platform, we can't talk about SNDL. When we're talking about other companies, everybody's always commenting, like, when are you having SNDL on the next time? And, you know, you got a big following, to say the least. So when you talked about opportunities, what would you say your top 2 opportunities for the company this year?
One of them is continue consolidating our retail network and footprint in Canada. Obviously, that gives us a scale to continue expanding our capacity utilization in manufacturing and cultivation. So that is continuation of the huge progress we made already in 2024. There are many more steps we are taking this year and will continue making in the future. International is a huge immediate opportunity, not in the sense of starting to deploy huge amounts of capital in Europe, but selling flower to Europe. As you know, 60% of the volumes that are right now in Europe, they're coming from Canada. We have already, as you know, cultivation, so we expand our capacity, and we're seeing probably north of $20 million of revenue this year just coming out of an opportunistic approach.
One of the big facets of the SNDL story has been disciplined capital deployment with the Sunstream vehicle. How are you looking at the U.S. right now? I mean, we're seeing a lot of MSOs and a lot of companies with fundamentals going the other way. I know you're currently in court with Parallel as well as Skymint, looking to get those assets free and clear and start to operate them. Are you looking for further opportunities in the United States, or is it kind of shoring up those assets, creating the nucleus, and then starting to build around that strategy?
It's more the second. Obviously, the first step, we need to get to the end of the restructuring processes and close those deals. After that, we need to decide whether or not we're going to be controlling those assets, or we're still going to be playing a similar role to the one that we're playing today. As you know, our board has initiated that strategic review.
Yes.
We'll probably have some decisions over the next few months about what direction we're going. But we believe that first we need to stabilize those operations. They have been going through a very long, over 2-year restructuring program that can destabilize any company. So rebuilding a strong management team, finding the right foundational processes and business model, and from there start growing. That's our idea. We have capital, as I said before. So once we have a solid foundation, we will be certainly considering expansion.
And I know you had mentioned exporting from Canada to the EU. Are you looking at operational assets in the EU as well to expand that footprint, really to get the true global reach that you're looking for? Or is it too early in that life cycle in the EU?
We think that maybe a little bit too early. We're certainly exploring partnerships and building the networks with almost everybody in Europe. Our team visits Europe on a regular basis. We have met several European operators during the course of today, and we'll do some more tomorrow. But if you ask me personally, I think that the European landscape is going to change significantly over the next few months, if not years.
Over the next few months, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, in the type of players that are developing business models today are different to the players that we were seeing a year ago. And probably they will be different to the players that we'll be seeing in a year from now.
So who comes to mind? Give me an example if you think of that.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you specific companies right now. Our procurement team and our commercial team is the one that is building those relationships. But we know that some of the analysis that we have done over the last few months, some of them, they are not doing well, and some others that nobody was really paying attention to are starting to rise to the occasion. But we know as well, regulatory environment, distribution channels, all of it is going to change, right? But the cost of failure in Europe, if you go big and you deploy a lot of capital right away, it could be very expensive. And if you see the inception of this industry in Canada, in the US, not everybody that started very early and invested a lot of capital made it, right? So we think that Europe is going to be, to some extent, the Wild West for a while, and until it starts finding its footing.
So growth opportunities, but don't get ahead of yourself, right?
Obviously, everybody has the right to do whatever they want. We think that we
Well said.
want to spend time building the relationships, understanding the market, what direction the market is going. At the same time, as I said, we have cultivation capacity, very good quality flower that we can export to Europe at very good margins and very good prices for the European folks. So yeah, it's a win-win for everybody, but we want to see things how things are playing out.
Makes sense.
Where do you see prices in Europe going? I mean, we've seen the Canadian LPs just start to export a ton of their flower to the European Union, so much that you've seen prices start to go up in Canada domestically due to supply and demand. Do you think that there's a current saturation point that it gets to the EU where price starts to compress versus expand, and then you start to see the LPs focus more on Canada? Or do you think that the appetite there is just going to grow in lockstep and be able to keep taking that biomass from Canada?
Continue taking the biomass. The market will continue expanding over the next few years, but prices will go down at one point in time. Clearly, I think it would have stabilized at relatively equal global levels at one point in time. Would it take 5 years, 10 years? Who knows? Okay. But most likely it would have stabilized at similar levels. Obviously, it depends if you are a pure medical versus recreational. That creates some price difference.
And you're on a panel later in talking about brand and the power about brand. I guess kind of unpack that a little bit. Is it more so, are you talking about the brands that have brand power in Canada, globally? Do you think that eventually we get to a point where SNDL being a global cannabis company, you see brand congruency in Canada, the United States, and the EU? Or is it going to be very market specific?
Well, the panel obviously is going to be exploring from different angles. What does it take to expand a brand outside of your home market? We do have some experience with that. Even if you take Canada, Canada has multiple provinces. Our experience with brands is they may mean something to you, they may mean something to some of your partners. Do they mean something to your consumer? That's the key. On the product side, data tells us that there's not a lot of brand loyalty. Yeah. Obviously, there would always be one person to a group of people that will be loyal to a certain product and certain brand. But in general, the big numbers, they tell you that there's very little brand recognition, and consumers are still exploring different products, different forms. Where we do see a stronger brand name and recognition is with our retail chains, our biggest banner, Value Buds. Yeah. We believe that there we have found a competitive advantage. It's a brand that has a different level of recognition, significantly higher level of recognition than individual products. It's probably as well the combination of a successful business model, really being a value player, having one of the best prices in the industry, and obviously the scale that we have. We're aiming towards almost this year. We're going to be ending the year over 200 doors in Canada.
And one thing that's unique to your story is the Alcanna acquisition. So you have a very large alcohol company within the SNDL footprint. Do you leverage that side of the business for data and insights to, let's say, see brand affinity, shopper insights, any sort of buying trends, and then see if they translate over to the cannabis side of the business, kind of like A/B testing? Because you're arguably the only company in this space that has the liberty of doing that. And we do see a lot of parallels between the two.
Right. We don't see actually too many correlations between liquor and cannabis at the moment. Obviously, there's a certain shift from liquor consumers that are starting to shift a little bit more.
Really?
No, not in terms of what the shopper is looking for. It's a very different dynamic and different shopping dynamic. The basket sizes are very different as well.
So who's ever committed to liquor is probably going to stick to liquor and vice versa, is what you're saying.
We will see. We're open to all sorts of options when it comes to liquor. Right now, it's clearly playing an important role for us. It's giving us the scale. It's giving us the capabilities as well. It's different investing in an e-com platform or a loyalty program where you can leverage a cannabis business, or you can double or triple the size of that platform when you add a liquor business. The type of capabilities we can invest and develop from a systems perspective, back office process automation, and even best practices on how do you run a store. We believe that liquor is giving us a lot of those benefits today. Yeah. Would it be the same in the future? Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, we talk about being a generational thing. Anthony and I were on a live stream last week. We talked about the parent company of Jack Daniels, Jones Foreman. They reported in their latest quarter that there was a 7% sales dip, where their CEO came out and finally acknowledged publicly it's because of changes in consumer trends with cannabis being consumed. So when he's saying stuff like that, is that you're always looking for new customers? As obviously people get older, you have younger generations that come in that are legal drinking and smoking ages, so or cannabis consumption ages. Saying that, you don't think there's a lot of crossover. It's like people that stick to liquor. And if you're talking about, I guess, a dip in sales, it's because maybe that younger generation is committing to cannabis now. Is that fair?
Yeah, they're exploring on both markets. And we certainly see, particularly in younger generations, a little bit of an attrition away from liquor, a little bit more into cannabis. But yeah, the industry saw a dip last year. I think it was the same case globally, but both US and Canada, we're seeing volumes declining 4, 5, 6%. Yeah. This year, we're seeing a stabilization. Yeah, the dynamic in the year to go is going to be different. Already in the first half of the year, it's going to be significantly more stable than what it was last year. And over the long run, we still believe that the business will probably decline very low single digits volume-wise. But with inflation and pricing, it will probably grow as an industry low single digits, but it's still a little bit of growth over the long run, right? Could you have some years where you're -5, some others that you're +3? Absolutely. We think that last year was still an element of a stabilization coming out of COVID, where there was a spike in consumption of in-home liquor. But as I said, this year we were anticipating a certain level of stabilization.
Which makes sense. So if you had to predict anything with this new administration, the Canadian market, from an operational standpoint, do you see changes in the right direction now that there's yes, it's the same Liberal Party, but obviously a new Prime Minister involved? Is there anything that you can provide that you think that there is some hope on the horizon for change from what we've seen the last 6-7 years?
Listen, I think that the Canadian government and the U.S. government, they have significantly bigger agendas to focus on at the moment.
But one day that's going to come to fruition, right?
One day is going to come. Obviously, we'll need to review some of the regulations that we have about minimum dosage that you have on edibles, for example, about how excise taxes are applied across the board or not. So there are multiple areas where we're working and consulting the government on ways forward. But we actually don't necessarily focus too much on that. everybody has to play by the same rules. When the rules change, we need to change the game as well. But we're focusing on how can we drive efficiency improvements, how can we win in the market, regardless of what the regulations are. So that's what I'm saying. Obviously, we try to help and develop the right type of regulations and partner with the governments when they're open to it. But as long as they are what they are, we still have to compete under those rules.
Makes sense.
Be successful in them.
That's what you got to say for now. But one day, hopefully, we get some reform and some change in the U.S. and then obviously some change in Canada. But you got to continue to strive day in and day out. Before I let you go, one last question. We always hear about Zach George being one of the most respected CEOs of the cannabis space. What would you best describe him as a CEO? What do you think his biggest strengths are?
How many minutes do we have?
I know, right?
He's a great guy. I mean, he's very approachable. He's super
He
smart.
paid me to ask this, though.
I'm surprised, actually, because one of the things he's very humble as well.
Yes.
He's constantly looking for out-of-the-box ideas, how to continue building the right foundation for the company. He's super strategic. He doesn't want to just survive 1 month or 1 quarter. He wants to really build a strong foundational platform from a business perspective, a strategic perspective, but as well organizational perspective. One of the things that we're focusing the most on, he's driving that tone from the top, is we're as good as our teams are. So how do we build the best organization? That's the one that will give us the biggest competitive advantage in the future. And he's clearly a great leader in driving that.
Yeah. Very well respected within the space. But listen, great team in place, great little story to say the least that you guys are building. And most importantly, keep in touch, and I appreciate the update, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Alberto.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to wrap things up here. We got Jesse Channon, actually, for the cannabis coming up in just a little bit, followed by Frank Colombo, Anthony Cogniglio. So a few more podcasts here, interviews this afternoon. So make sure you stay checked in with us here for the rest of the afternoon. Trade of Black podcast here in Chicago at Benzinga Capital Conference. Be right back, everyone. Everybody, welcome back to the. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Trade to Black podcast, or should I call this the Gold's Gym podcast? Look at these guys, the way they bench press. The size of this guy.
Hi, Shad. Good to see you.
He's a big guy too, but this
Sure
this is big. Is this bad? Should we cut?
Let's roll. Let's roll with it.
Let's roll with it. How's things? How's the conference treating you?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, honestly, I'm sure you guys saw the same thing. Attendance probably bigger than I thought it was going to be, honestly, this year. People seem excited. They seem positive. I keep asking people what they're hearing. But
you are seeing that, a lot of positivity?
I am. I mean, I've been catching up with people all day, and I think everybody has their own reason for being excited. But it seems like operations are trending in the right direction for a lot of the operators in a number of states. And obviously, everybody's just continuing to wait to see what's going to happen at the regulatory level.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Seems to be a lot of positivity. So
you guys have gotten through the restructuring somewhat. What's the road forward look like?
Yeah, no, look, I think getting that behind us, getting that closed is great, because now the focus goes back to what's next, right? So, nothing's changed. I mean, we continue to try to focus on simplifying the business. We've had some really good initiatives around rationalizing a bunch of the SKUs that we produce, trying to rein in the brand architecture, really leaning into the third-party brands that are working. We've sunset a couple first-party brands that just weren't a fit. We're going to be leaning into some of the architectures that are performing well, expanding SKUs in certain states where we know that needs to be done. And then again, sucking it in some markets where we had just gotten way too broad. It's better to be great at a finite number of things than try to be good at everything. So that continues to be the focus. Find more efficiencies, more advantage in cost across these markets, and continue to find, incremental, steady, organic growth from a sales point of view. And I think if you put all those together, you find more solid footing, a more sustainable business moving forward.
Any insights into New York?
New York as a state and as a program, I think, continues to get better. I like what we're seeing from a wholesale point of view. We actually just increased our plant count. We're going to have our largest harvest to date coming down over the next 30 days. So, we have more capacity to continue to expand in that market. We're still looking for 2 locations right now, in 2 for medical. We haven't made the flip to adult use. Most of our focus right now is on continuing access for patients on medical, and then on producing products and wholesale for adult use. Really focusing on flower. I think we're liking what we're seeing coming out of Riverhead, the flower that's coming out of that facility. Testing's up, terps look better, quality of what's coming out of finished products looks good. So just lean in and keep getting on shelf.
When was that announcement? Was it late March, early April, restructuring of the debt?
So the announcement was originally, sort of coming out of the end of the year into the beginning of the year. We just closed like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like 10 days out.
I bring it up. Frank Colombo from Viridian, we had him on, and he said it was a great announcement. You need more runway time. You talked about some of the changes in the past about scaling back, not being in as many states. So for anybody trying to get an update right now on what the vision is moving forward, what are your top 2 to 3 states? Is it still Colorado? Is it still?
Well, I think it's, look, when you say top 2 to 3 states, right? It's like, love all your kids, but there's only one that goes to private school, right? So it depends on what you're measuring it by, right? So if you're looking at, and we produce this every quarter, right? As far as what the top 5 are by revenue and EBITDA. So anybody can go back and look at that from an earnings point of view. I think when you look holistically at some of the strongest states in the portfolio, Virginia is always going to jump up there as probably the strongest from both a margin and a revenue point of view. You've got states like New Jersey and Ohio, Colorado, Maryland, that are just really impressive. They continue to produce. They're producing on the top line. Some of them really strong on the margin side. I think one thing that every state has in common, minus maybe Virginia, there's still room to get better, right? You can still go from good to great in a number of areas in the supply chain in those states. So while I'm really appreciative of the efforts that have taken place over the last 6 months that have caused sort of those increases in margin and revenue, there's still more we need to do.
Yeah. We've had Jushi on a few times with Trent Wolovac, and he's talked about, looks like some positive optimism that's creating with the gubernatorial race, what's going to transpire for cannabis in general related to Virginia. Are you hearing anything that gets you a little bit excited about the market? Or do you not get involved in that conversation all that much?
I try not to get too involved. I think that the 2 best words in the cannabis industry in Virginia right now is term limit. I think is probably the 2 best words. So I do think everyone has a more favorable look on what's going to happen with the change from a governorship point of view. But either way, I mean, I've always said this, I think we're past the point of no return in so many markets in so many states. I think we're starting to approach that at a federal level. Smoking weed is great. Smoking safe weed is better. So I just think that as you continue to see good operators producing great products, giving a safe alternative in these markets, it becomes more and more difficult, regardless of what side of the aisle you are from a political point of view, to say, no, an illicit market is actually way better. Let's just stick with that. So I think you're seeing more common sense now.
Yeah. Who's doing it right now in terms of brand?
Oh, come on. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Ask them more specific questions.
What's a brand that's caught your eye? That you've
Brand
seen
that
in the last year? Because I know you've got a good eye for brands.
Okay.
Marketing
And
background.
go.
I'm not going to say any of ours, right? I do love some of our brands. I think we've done a great job with the expansion of some of those. You're wearing a hat of one of my favorites. I got to give a shout out to my guy Brady. I do love.
Where is Brady?
A retail point of view. Yeah. I do love Sunburn. I think that his story is authentic. It comes through in everything about his brand. They grow great flower. They have an eye for the consumer. The dispensaries are incredibly well built out, right? So I do love his from a retail point of view. From a product brand, I mean, Rusty at Old Pal, like it's tough to root against Rusty. Yeah, it's tough to root against those guys at Old Pal. Yeah. There's just something about that brand I just think resonates with people. We put it on shelf and we produce it in the market, and people they come out in droves. I do love, and we are partners with these guys as well, but not like in a super strategic way. So I feel like I can say it. Revelry does great product, but I feel like their bags and their swag, like their sort of stuff, I just think it's really good. Like I think in our industry sometimes people cut corners and the quality is not great. I was at an event this past week and I was with a good friend of mine, Victor, who's the head of creative at Toomey. Okay. And the only thing that I have seen that's even remotely close quality, when you think about the sort of quality that Toomey has where it never wears out, like I have, and it looks brand new. Yeah. And that's shout out to Victor Sands. They make the best luggage by far. Revelry makes things that hold up. I have stuff from Revelry that they sent me years ago that looks brand new, and people always ask me, what is that? So I think from an apparel point of view and a bag point of view, like I really love what those guys are doing. And then from like a big brand point of view, I think we all have probably a lot that we could be doing better.
So let me take that a step further. How important do you think it is for cannabis brands to also have a lifestyle element?
Oh,
huge.
That's one of the big things that we've seen about Sunburn. Brady went experiential, went apparel, and it resonated.
When you hear that story, like, how do you compete against that?
Cookies set the bar too.
Cookies absolutely set the bar. And I think that from a product brand point of view, it's impossible to deny that something like cookies is still so culturally relevant, right? I think cookies, and this is not just me saying it, obviously they had some expansion problems when they went to their markets, pretty well publicized. They were known for being one thing in California and they were not that thing other places. And that hurt their brand, right? It hurt their brand. So I feel like consistency with a brand is everything. Yeah. So I think that's why as an MSO, it's very difficult for us at times to build brands because you want that consistency across state lines.
Yes.
Where you have different supply chains, different regulatory environments. It makes it very hard. Easier on the concentrate side than on the flower side.
So do you think flower looks something like a craft beer model potentially?
Oh, don't get me in trouble here. I'm the worst.
What was
the worst.
What was the term you used this morning when talk regional
craft? Because
do you agree with that?
Okay, so I said this like 4 years ago. I don't think it was with you guys, but I got in so much trouble for it. And now I've had two people say it back to me already at this conference, being like, it's kind of true. I think in many ways, weed is tomatoes that get you high. It's a biological asset. It has fluctuations based on where it's grown, the environment that it's grown in. San Marzano tomatoes are famous for what they are because it's volcanic ash and they're grown in a certain region, right? So to me, I believe that how this moves forward in flower is there will be some exotic genetics and things like that will always be bought in a jar with a label. But I think there's also a home for just growing great plants, leaning in and embracing the fact that depending on where they're grown, the genetic is only part of it, of the expression. So much about the environment also creates that expression. Is it grown under glass? Is it grown indoor? There's so many different factors at play there. but I think you just evaluate it for what it is at the moment that you see it. And I won't take it as far as to say, like, I have a running joke with Aaron Gray about, at some point it's an olive bar at Whole Foods for like just commodity-based flour, like, right? But so I think for high-end, really craft genetics, there will always be a home for that. And to me, cookies is a great example of that, right? I think for just like meat and potatoes, 18 to 24% testing strains that are good on terps, good quality, right in that middle sort of B plus range. I do think that those are shopped based on not the brand, but the attributes of the flower itself. And that's tomatoes that get you high.
So you guys know this better than I think. Educate me here. Like when you think of alcohol, Medola, Corona, southern states, Northeast, a lot different. So when it comes to cannabis, how would you best describe what a cannabis consumer is in the state of Florida versus, say, some of these other states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Massachusetts? Like what's
this is such a trap question. And you're going to come on a journey with me, and I know you're going to back me up on this one. Immediately what you want to say is, well, in Florida, obviously everything's going to be citrusy and it's going to be bright and it's going to be sativa and it's going to be daytime. But you go up to New York and some of their strongest legacy OG is like lemon sour diesel. And it's like, well, hold on, wait a minute. That sounds a lot like what I just said for Florida, right? So I do believe that so much of, I'll go a little further back. I think a lot of alcohol consumption was crafted by many of the immigrants that came into these different regions of the country and had recipes and love for things from the old world. So when you look at places in the Midwest, when you look at places in the Northeast that have Irish or Germanic or all of these different neighborhoods, and
good point, very good point.
That crafted a lot of, what type of whiskey are they drinking? What type of beer are they drinking, right? I think what's really cool about the cannabis industry in this country is so much of it has been organically driven here in the States, and the genetics that have been built that you don't see that. So there are certain things that are tied to certain regions, but I think you get a broad appreciation for a lot of different expressions. That's a really good point.
No better place to be than an Irish family reunion in Boston with whiskey, right?
It's not the worst place. I would say Scottish, but Irish is not a bad place to be. So yeah. Yep.
So look, in a perfect world, if we get rescheduling, we talk about research that's going to get involved. Does rescheduling change anything from a branding standpoint?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, it does, because I think that rescheduling will be a huge exhale moment for the industry where they will look at their cash flow models moving forward in a different light, right? So if you are not dealing with 280E and you're dealing with a Schedule 3 that maybe starts to open up and loosen some conversations around some banking or some domestic listing or a number of things that could be fast follows to that, right? I think that makes you look at the business differently moving forward about what is it that you are investing in now. And I think everyone has to understand brands matter, they will matter, and they will only matter more moving forward. And so the only reason why you're not seeing a bigger push and a bigger investment on brand from operators is because we are fighting to find efficiencies and cash flow and survival in the business that we have today. If you change the way that business looks, and we are now forced to think about what should these businesses look like, brands. Like, you have to get right out in front of that.
If you could take the 280 money and start to invest in experiential and invest in
so how would
brand.
what's some notable things that would change as far as your day-to-day operations in rescheduling, that you could focus more time and effort on, say, something like that versus the efficiency model?
I feel like I'm going to sound like such a nerd here, and I'm not going to go into the long version of this, but I've had so many conversations about how when you look at how societies develop, right, not having to chase your food versus having modern agriculture leads to Camelot, leads to big castles and high walls and all these amazing innovations, because when you wake up in the morning and you stretch, you look outside and you're like, food's there, so now I can think about everything else. I can think about how to make all these other things better in my life, right? Right now, this industry wakes up every day and it chases food, right? When you look at a cash flow and you look at a business that feels different and you say, okay, I feel pretty good about where we are foundationally as a company now. Now let's start to get innovative again, right? rewind 3 or 4 years ago, there were a lot more conversations around brands. There were a lot more conversations around innovation and technology. And so now, fast forward into a world where everybody's feeling a little bit more like that. Equities run a little bit. You can raise some capital. Things feel different from a liquidity profile. I think brands and technology and innovation jump right back up in the front.
When you talk about some of those conversations that happened 3-4 years ago about innovation, we always talk about what a lot of companies did wrong. Was there certain things they did right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were things that people did right, but this is such a crazy industry because every effort that was made to normalize a consumer experience, develop a technology endpoint for inside of a dispensary, develop SOPs that were more consistent across states, was met with unbelievable resistance from regulatory, right? About, well, no, you can't shop here, you can only buy, or you can't have technology here, you can't have a window that you can see this, right? So there's all these, right? There's all these complexities that you were dealing with. Oh, it's wild.
Yeah.
So we navigated around that, right? My hope is that with a rescheduling, that also changes and relaxes a lot of the issues that we face on just a state-by-state regulatory. As soon as you have things that you feel like can be more consistent, like we were talking about earlier, brand is all about consistency. When regulatory and state-by-state doesn't allow you to be consistent, it's very difficult to invest in consistency.
I get it.
So I think that's what changes.
If you're looking to deploy capital somewhere, you want to know what kind of direction this industry is, and you don't have that right now. But this is why there's so much disconnect we talk about in the state and federal government. But hopefully we get some change. But we got our ears to the ground, and we're trying to hear what we can hear today to find out if there's any momentum regarding rescheduling. But we won't go down that lane right now. But when it comes to be a little bit more serious and some fruition involved, then we'll obviously address it and talk more about it. But until then, it's all about operational efficiency, right?
I wouldn't be the right person to ask. There are definitely rooms that those conversations
when will rescheduling happen?
I'm not in those rooms. I think it'll happen sometime before 2030. I feel pretty confident, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and the Dodgers are going to win the World Series, right?
At some point, yeah. It'll happen.
Listen, always appreciate catching up with you. It's been a while, but you're one of the best in the industry.
Good to see you, buddy.
Thanks
for having me, man. Good to see you, buddy. Yep.
Jesse Channon, Cannabis. We're going to have Frank Colombo on just a moment to talk about air wellness, Anthony Cogniglio, and a few others. So make sure you stick around. Appreciate you checking in here at the Traded Black Podcast here at Benzinga in Chicago. Be right back. Trade a Black podcast back here in Chicago as we keep the podcast going. Next up, Frank Colombo, Managing Director of Viridian Capital Partners. Good to see you, sir. Lots to talk about today. What's the big sentiment that you're hearing over and over now that we're 8 hours in?
I think it's a mixed sentiment. It's, people have some kind of feeling like maybe this is the bottom.
Is that a good thing when you think about the future? We don't always want to talk about the bottom, but if there is a bottom, where do we go from here?
Well, I personally think that we're not at the bottom yet. I think there's still downside, but it's only because of the fact that the forces that got us here in the first place are unchanged. There's no resolution in Washington. There's no halt in price compression. The economy is weakening. So to me, I think, companies have to be willing to batten down the hatches and be cash flow positive and ride this out. But I don't think there's, a kick save from Washington. I know you disagree a little bit with that. Read your stuff.
Well, in the event we do get rescheduling, you've talked about that's not
Yeah.
going to change a lot, but it will change some things in the sentiment in a different direction.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, I think rescheduling and safer together, if you got both of those, it'd be huge. Rescheduling doesn't do much for MSO cash flows because nobody's paying it 280E now. So it doesn't change.
Which we've
cash
discussed
flows.
before, right?
But on the other hand, the sentiment is huge. You finally have something, moving in Washington, D.C. So the sentiment change is huge. And I think safer is a bigger thing because, I've talked to a lot of, for instance, the rating agencies, rating public debt, which would be a big thing to get new investors into the cannabis debt market. And the rating agencies, one by one, I've talked to all of them, and they basically say, rescheduling, we will not move. That will not make a difference for us. We want to see an actual legislative movement in Washington that
Which
caps
makes
the risk.
sense.
Yeah, so safer would be even bigger.
Yeah.
And, safer also opens up, I think, get those two together and you will open the path towards uplistings. And I think you also open the path towards credit card usage, which would be huge. So those two things is still very huge. I think, you could easily see more than a doubling of prices, maybe even a tripling of prices.
Yeah.
When you were talking about reaching a bottom and the forces that got us here, how much do you believe that hemp has attributed to that?
Well, I just did a kind of estimate of the hemp market state by state, and I went down and kind of attributed different amounts of potential consumption, whether you're a limited medical market like Texas, or whether you're a full medical market or a full rec market. And I went down and kind of said, this is how much consumption per adult you'd have. And I came out with 19 billion.
Okay.
So 19 billion is a big number.
Yeah.
It's a really big number.
So
Chicago. Sorry about that, everybody. With Frank Colombo again. Okay, where were we? We were talking about $19 billion, taking a chunk from the hemp industry into the cannabis industry, as Anthony asked how much of an impact has it had. But you want to elaborate off of that?
Yeah, I think that when you think about hemp and medical markets, we were talking about Florida as a medical market, how much of it came out of like medical patients you would think would want the safety and the assurance that they're buying TerrAscend. It's a kind of stamp safe product. But my contention is that in the really big medical markets like Florida and Pennsylvania, they're not really medical anymore anyway. You know, they're a large chunk of that usage is really rec. And the thing about hemp is it is a disruptive product in the sense that it is good enough for the low end of the market. Good enough being a, academically actually, recognized term from the guy that came up with a disruption theory. And it's good enough, it's cheaper, and it's widely available. And so I think there is a big chunk of that would have gone into the legal market. So is it all the 19 million? No, of course not. But it is dampened the growth at the least of the legal market.
It's like whack-a-mole in this industry right now. It's just one thing after another, it seems, yes?
Yes, but, we brought it on ourselves. I mean,
How so when you bring up the topic of hemp? How do we bring that on ourselves?
Because you say, okay, why is hemp become a $19 billion industry? Because you can ship it across the state lines. You don't have to test it like crazily like you do with cannabis. We brought that upon ourselves by over-regulating, over-costing cannabis. If we would have moved, cannabis ostensibly is a safer product than alcohol, but it's tested way more than alcohol.
So this is more of an issue with government versus the actual industry when you say it's brought on by ourselves.
Yeah, it is.
Do you not think cannabis should have those testing standards when it comes to, let's say, mycotoxins, heavy metals, contaminants? Because at the same time,
I think there's a transition period, and the transition period is this. In the end of the day, do you trust the FDA to protect you that the Chips Ahoy cookies you buy don't have any contaminants in them?
no.
No, you trust the brand that's selling that.
Correct.
The brand has all the incentive in the world to provide a safe product. And in the end, I think that will be cannabis. I mean, you're buying a branded product. They don't want to kill their customer. They don't want to lose their market share. In the end, brands will produce a lot of the safety that is now we're relying on testing for.
But to the converse in that, for instance, let's use the nutraceutical market. Yeah. So the nutraceutical market has actually started to go the other way. Brands are starting to test and show COAs and show what's actually in the product to gain trust and gain customers. So you think the cannabis industry, on a long tail perspective, will reverse that trend, and the brands will be strong enough to where they can command the trust within the consumer. So if I'm buying flower from TerrAscend, there's trust built up there that their flower, regardless of the testing parameters, is not going to have any sort of contaminants in it.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is odd because I'm old, and
I hear you. I hear you, and it makes complete sense. Just when you look at younger consumers on the side of the spectrum, they need more transparency, and they're demanding more transparency from the things that they're putting in their body today.
I agree, but I would say that 90% of all the cannabis I've ever consumed in my lifetime has been untested, right? Because I
can say the same thing.
And maybe it hurt me. Okay, maybe it killed a few brain cells. But I never got sick. I never, I've smoked a lot of bad weed, but I've never smoked anything that hurt me. And why? It's just because I knew a guy who I trusted to get cannabis from. You know.
So do you think from a certain standpoint, we've created a boogeyman in the argument for pesticides and mold and mildew in flower?
I do. I think that, is there a role for testing? Yeah, I'm not advocating, get rid of testing entirely. But if you look at alcohol, it's tested, but it's not tested like every batch. It's tested more on a, sporadic basis. It's tested much less frequently and less intensively than cannabis. And, is that warranted? Well, alcohol can kill you and cannabis can't. And so to me, it argues for less.
So do you think we're too sensitive with some people within this industry when it comes to testing? Like, what are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say that one of the reasons why hemp has grown like it has is it is a lower cost base product, and we've overcosted. We've made cannabis too expensive to produce, too expensive to distribute, too expensive relative to its perceived value. And let me think about it this way. By all estimates, the illicit market is maybe 1.5 times as big as the illicit market. So that right there is proof positive that there's a vast audience of people out there who don't value the testing and don't value the seed to sale tracking and don't value any of that. Why? Because they're voting with their wallets. They're buying the illicit product right now. Why? Because it's readily available, it's cheaper, and that's what they value. So we have left a big part of the market on the table by overcosting our product. And the proof is pure and simple. The proof is just the existence of this huge illicit market.
Do you think that the market? Do you think that the foundation of the foundation of what the industry has been built on is going to radically change for this industry needs to radically change for this industry to survive?
Well, I don't think it's going to change overnight. I think years and years. I think once it is, let's go crazy and say, all right, we're fully legal. Yeah. We go full federal legalization. Then you're not going to have cultivation in every state.
Right.
You're going to have massive facilities like the Glass House, 5 million, and it's much easier to have quality control on a huge. Well, you're going to argue this point. I know that, but I mean, just mechanically, it is. And so, if you have centralized production, centralized, manufacturing in a few places, it will be easier and less costly to do testing.
Aren't there stats that show that what 80% of cannabis consumers want to support the legal market, though? Is that not correct? I thought we talked about that in the past. I've come across stats like that. But is this a generational thing? Like, I understand what's happened in the past, and you're right. The market is showing how much supportive it is for the illicit market, but I don't know what feedback that you have, but when you speak to younger generations, is the testing, labeling, all those parameters important to them?
Sure.
Transparency is something that's important, but at the same time, I mean, Frank puts up a pretty good point. I go to Whole Foods, I buy a shitload of things I put in my body. They're not crazily tested. I'm trusting that it's got an organic label on it and that there's no pesticides, wax coatings, anything on there. And I just trust the fact that I'm buying at Whole Foods. It says it's organic and it's there. I'm not looking at a COA. I don't need a full panel test to tell me it. The trust is there. It's actually a very good point that he brings up that I've never thought of before, that maybe we are over testing and really we're too stringent. But at the same time, it's a nascent industry that might need that on the front end until you can actually build up that trust build up those SOPs and protocols.
And to your point about, you ask consumers, do they prefer a legal product? Well, that's a biased question. It's like, asking, gee, are you in favor of motherhood and apple pie? Yeah, of course I am. But so they're not going to say, no, I believe heavily in the illegal market. Everybody's going to have an incentive to say, yeah, I believe in supporting the legal cannabis market. So I don't believe those polls because it's not responsive to the facts, which is the size of the two markets. Like
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I mean, at the same time, though, me personally, I'd rather go buy my cannabis at a farmer's market from somebody that's growing it, that's small batch craft, versus buying it from a gigantic corporation. I buy my vegetables.
I agree, and you're probably not a buyer of jug wine either.
No, I'm not.
But on the other hand, most of the wine in the country is produced is boxed wine. So, when things settle out, I think 75% of the consumption is going to be a commodity product.
Yeah.
It's going to be greenhouse grown. It's going to be the Bud Light of cannabis.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that there won't be consumers that are, after the craft grown product. There will certainly be, just like there is in wine. There's buyers of vintage wine, and there will be connoisseurs of cannabis. There are, and there always will be, but it won't be the majority of the product. It'll be 25%.
We're starting to see some crack showing within companies. We have Air that's going into a restructuring process. We've got a couple of others that people want to debate whether or not they've got a collision course with that. I mean, you put out a pretty sound analysis on the recapping potential of Air the other week. Walk me through that. I mean, do you think that that's a realistic scenario for them, that they recap something in that fashion? Does the TV make sense?
Yeah, maybe before you get into
Great
that,
question.
top line of the people that haven't seen within your newsletter, you were saying based on the restructuring, they'd have to give away 90% of their business right now, is what you said?
Around 90% of the equity would go to the lenders in the plan that I outlined and in the graph you saw. But the interesting thing is that, the 10% that's left is worth as much as the 100% that they've got now, because, when you just run through the math, and I didn't change the enterprise value, by the way. I think the enterprise value would actually go up because you're eliminating all the crisis of maturity, and you have a delevered company that can actually produce, it can grow projects, it can develop, use capital for growth. So I actually think the value of the overall company would be higher, but I didn't use any of that. I just, 90% of the company goes to the lenders. And to me, if you look at cannabis restructurings, it's been very bimodal, right? There's been the extend, pretend, and amend school, which is the predominant school, where we just push out the maturities, we waive covenant waivers, we charge a little fee, and we just pretend that everything's going to be better in the future. Or there is the full-on, receivership, which is, you can call it receivership, but really what we're talking about is liquidation, right? It's liquidation. And as a high yield analyst in my past and a distressed analyst after that, liquidation never produces the highest valuation. Never. And so, that tells me that it's a liquidation is a inopportune thing to do. I mean, there's got to be a way, as long as the company.
Is that where Air Wellness is headed to?
I'm sorry? Liquidation,
Air Wellness, you think that's where they're headed to? No.
Well, look, they've got two big lenders, Milbank and FISA, and they've rolled once already. In fact, it was like February 24 that they did their restructuring. They just did it. So, on that basis, I would say that tells me two things. Number one, they don't want the keys, because they could have taken the keys a year ago. And on the other hand, they don't want to recognize their losses.
You've indicated that a lot before in a few other interviews, where lenders don't want these assets, that runway time is key. So that's at least somewhat on some of these operators' side, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when you're talking about a company like Air, where, my metrics tell me the asset value is worth less than the liabilities, that's the only thing people have going for them. You have, if you have an out of the money option, you really are dependent on two things for your value. One is runway, time to maturity, and the other is volatility. You want big volatility. And you can't have any more volatility than what we have at this moment in time in cannabis, where, we might have rescheduling, we might have safer. That's enormous volatility. And so time to run is immensely valuable to equity holders. And if you take the point of view that I just did, which is that the debt is somewhat underwater, that means that the debt has option-like characteristics as well. And so they want the same thing. They want time to run, they want volatility. And so.
Do you think there's any other names that are looking at this scenario in the short term in the space?
You mean at doing a full restructuring or?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you go down the line and say, who else has got big maturities? Well, we just saw Forefront already went the other way, which, you know, kind of a surprise given all the whatever the fees they spent with Canaccord to come up and fix the situation that they just ended up turning over the keys to the receiver. You know, I think Schwaz is really interesting.
Yeah.
Schwaz, you know, I don't know if you saw it, but Altmore filed a complaint. And it was a really interesting complaint because to me it is, maybe this has happened before and I just haven't seen it, but it's one of the first examples of, you know, lender on lender violence, as they say. You know, the polite word is liquidity management exercises, but it's colloquially called lender on lender violence. Altmore is alleging that the lender group that is headed by Chicago Atlantic moved some of the assets. There's a pre-roll machine. Yeah. They moved out of one subsidiary that was in the collateral pool of Altmore into another subsidiary that wasn't in that collateral pool. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes of at Schwaz. But if you go back to just not very long ago and you look at what the projections were for EBITDA for Schwaz a year ago, it seems like the valuation of the equity has gone to basically zero for reasons that aren't truly economic. Yeah. You know, one thing is true about Schwaz is there's no float. There's virtually zero public float. So that's conducive to like this cave-in of equity value. And then, you know, they are a year behind on filing financial statements. Yeah. It's another issue that doesn't play well with creditors or credit investors. So there's all these technical noise factors that come into Schwaz, but fundamentally, you know, if the equity analysts were even 50% correct on what cash flows should have been, I think they were calling for something like 50 million of EBITDA at one point, not very long ago. Now there's no estimates, but so even if cash flow is 25 million, not EBITDA, 25 million instead of 50, there's still, you know, significant recoverable value there in the company. And if you just, you know, liquidate it, you're not going to get that.
All right.
So,
Let's bring this all together then, moving forward. Back half 2025. Do we get rescheduling? And if we do, how's that change the industry in your view?
I am doubtful that we get rescheduling it by the end of 25. Why? You know, why? There's just one reason, which is Trump. You know, I mean, Trump could make it happen if he wanted to. I'm convinced that Trump has put all of the lieutenants in office there's enough yes men in office, and he has enough control over the Republican Party that if Trump came out and said, make it happen, it would happen. So it is just a question of how does it become a priority for Donald Trump, which you realize he's a teetotaler. He doesn't drink, he doesn't do any drugs, and it's familial reasons. I think his brother or somebody had a problem.
He does like the economic side. I do think there is potential for research. Doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, but this is where I think the medical play could be the first step in the right direction. But
you know, I couldn't agree more. That
your good friend Anthony off the camera here.
Look, I mean, everything rational says that he should like it. It's a classic states' rights issue. It's an economic benefit, you know, not only on the taxation revenue side, but you just stop spending on a lot of stuff that's just pure wasteful spending, like enforcement, courts, jails, all that stuff that we're spending money on is just a dead weight loss.
Yeah.
So everything says that it ought to work that way, but you have to answer the question, why have we not seen any positive movement whatsoever?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't point to a single thing.
Well, DEA head's not in yet. DEA head's not in yet. Terry Cole hasn't been confirmed.
Yeah. But he has been totally non-committal about whether he will support rescheduling if he is confirmed, right?
It's not priority review.
Yeah. Which,
look, we could be here all day. I always like to get different voices from different perspectives to give kind of the outlook on the industry. But
look, I would dearly love for this to happen. I mean,
bet.
everybody would. But you're asking me as somebody who's lived through years of Chuck Schumer. We've been Schumered too many times. And so, I think the market is telling you where the market is trading is. We will believe it when we see it, and not until.
Well, I think we've said that for a long time. Listen, always appreciate the feedback. Let's keep in touch, okay, Frank?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Frank Colombo, speak of the truth. In his way is what he believes, and you got to respect that. So keep it trucking along here, the Traded Black podcast here in Chicago. Anthony Cogniglio from New Lake Capital coming up in just a moment. Stick around, everyone. Chicago here at the Benzinga Capital Conference, and a familiar face to the show, Anthony Cogniglio from New Lake Capital. Good to see you, sir. How's your day going?
It's going great. Good to see you guys. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
A little
good
bit of
to be
technical
together.
difficulties this morning, but everything looks much better. Looks a lot better now with you on, my friend. How's that sound?
That sounds fabulous. I want to package that one up and get that out.
There you go. We'll get that into soundbite on Twitter. But look, a lot of people appreciate you, your direction, your education that you provide with regards to the overall industry, where it's going. We've asked this question to a lot of people here today. What are you seeing right now? What are you hearing that, yes, there's uncertainty. Let's just call it like it is. But tell us something that gives maybe some people, and I don't want to just talk about hopium and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
because we got to speak the truth. But at the same time, too, what is there that gets people to say, okay, there's still some hope for this industry moving forward?
Yeah, well, so we're only 3/4 of a way into day one, but so far the way I'd characterize these conversations is the plan for the future, right? What I'm not hearing is I'm not hearing the hopium. What I'm hearing is people who came ready to talk about a plan for the future. And we know there's a lot of distress in the industry.
Which is good.
And which, right, it's going to get worked out. I would say in previous conferences, there was a sense of depression immediately when you walked in the room. Right, there really was.
You could feel it just sucked out.
You just feel like the air's out. And now, actually, I'm feeling a bit of an energy because people have accepted where they are. They've accepted where the industry is. And now it's okay. How do we go from where we are with a plan? How do we work out the workouts that are going? And I'm somewhat optimistic. Now, you have me on enough. You know me well enough. I'm generally an optimistic person. But I'm optimistic that there's some deal making happening here. And that people are looking for ways to take some of the companies that are in distress and figure out what can be born out of that to be positive for the future.
Yeah, good point. Learned a lot again about, you want to say
go
something?
ahead.
Just, I don't want to go off topic, but just some of the things that we learned about the European market as well a couple times, but a lot of positive momentum regarding that market as well. But go ahead.
I was going to say, are there any details you can dive into to what you're hearing with what those plans could be for like these companies? Because I mean, obviously, we were talking about with Frank on how, well, not with Jesse. We had so many guests on today. We were talking with Jesse, who brought up a very good point that when companies don't have to focus on 280E, they can transform the other facets of their business and actually innovate, focus on brand, focus on product. Do you think that 280E is going to be a relief from companies to a certain extent, if and when we get there?
Listen, who's been paying? Not many people have been paying 280E.
Yeah,
But
And
just
it's
not
a
even
line
have to
item.
think, but they're siloing on the balance sheet, just not having to think about it anymore.
So let's take that from the opposite side, and I respect all the operators, but
Yep.
are you running your business to pay 280E, but you're not paying 280E? Come on, like operationally, when you look at the EBITDA, when you look at the margins for these businesses,
Yeah.
it's about how you run your business, right? EBITDA is before taxes,
I guess, yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
So it's before taxes. So to the extent that you're running your business saying, I'm doing something differently because I was thinking about 280E, but I
you're
wasn't
not.
paying for it, you're not. And
good
so
point.
is the cash flow profile of these businesses going to be any different if they're now moving 280E to a different line item but hadn't been doing so before? I go back to something I think we talked about on your show a couple of weeks ago. This is about execution, and it's about doing the hard things that companies have done, like laying off people, cutting off. So you're asking
Which
the
you have
question, what are
seen,
people
which
doing,
you have
right?
seen.
You've seen layoffs, you've seen numerous rounds, and then you've seen companies sell off pieces of their business.
Correct.
And so that's another healthy piece of the item. And so we're seeing that today. We're hearing people say, so-and-so's trying to sell off this, so-and-so's trying to sell off that, so-and-so's rationalizing this particular state or that particular state. Those are the things that will get the resulting company to have a much better cash flow profile.
Yeah.
And in the panel that I was on earlier today, I talked a lot about cash flow. I think I bored the crowd with how much I talked about cash flow, because if you have a business that has cash flow, you're going to be able to attract capital.
You got to have it. Well, we always talk about things that we heard, and actually 20 minutes ago, I'm not going to say who I heard this from, but there was a story out of Texas that said that Governor Greg Abbott is actually going to veto this bill, SB3.
SB3.
And I don't know whether that's true or not, but there is some rumors.
Everyone watching this stream is taking that as the gospel right now. The fact that you said it.
I'm throwing it out there though, because look, if we're going to be here and we're talking to people, it's like, what do they want to know? What do they want to hear? What are we listening to? That's something. I also heard that Abbott and Dan Patrick do not get along. So that's rather compelling to know some of the stuff that he came out in the press, to say the least. But is that the right move? I think it is the right move to obviously veto this bill, and if that indeed does happen.
So I don't know what the right move is. I don't know what the wrong move is. I don't know what's going to happen, but here's my guess. My guess all comes down to politics. And again, we've talked about these decisions. This is, in my opinion, most of this is about politics. So what's the right political move for him? If he vetoes it, he now owns gas station product.
Correct.
And does he want that? Now, politically, it would seem to me that if you were able to say, I veto gas station product, but I expanded access by approving at the same time, signing on to the expansion of teacup, he could sit there and say, I protected our children and I expanded access. To me, that is a winning political message.
Correct.
To just veto.
But is it, and I get that, but at the same time too, you're going to have.
He couldn't be more right. Vetoing makes sense if you have a plan of where to go.
Correct.
Vetoing it and just keeping the current system in place, that's hell in a handbasket. He's going to get crucified for the gas station stuff. It falls right on him.
And if it does happen, you guys are right. That's what will happen, is that there is a plan in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if it will happen.
Yeah, we don't know.
We hope it happens.
If it were to happen and we were to veto it, of course he's going to have a plan in place.
I still think he lets time expire. Time expiring is a smart political move. He doesn't own it. He doesn't own the problem. It just happens, and it happens. And then he nails Patrick.
I agree with that.
He nails Patrick with it. The political move is to let the time expire.
Yeah, the thing we don't know is we don't know what else is happening, right? He made the comment he has 1,000 bills on his desk. And so I don't think he's sitting there in his office for the next week or two reading every page of every bill.
Correct.
There's horse trading that's happening. Again, back to politics. There's horse trading that's happening. I'll do this one, you give me that one, you give me this one. So we have no idea where SB3 sits in the scope of that horse trading. And in fact, go back to Virginia, right? This is
I can't help but feel it's got to be.
Again.
I got to feel it's towards the top. The amount of attention this has received.
I also don't think they have the ability to enforce a total hemp ban in the state of Texas. You know how much manpower it's going to take to shut down all of those businesses?
Exactly.
And police all of that? They're not going to be able to put it into implementation. Like, sure, they can ban it. There'll be things that happen and transpire within Texas, but I don't think the toothpaste is going back in the tube, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to reconcile.
It's too big.
Yeah. It's really difficult.
What was the number that Frank told us that the hemp market has put a dent into the?
He said 19 billion.
19 billion
is his calculation for the hemp market.
I will say the other thing that I've heard here today that's different on this point is in previous conferences, I would push operators. I'd say, tell me how much the hemp market is impacting your business.
Yeah.
And the answer they were giving was 0 to maybe 5%. And I kept thinking,
that's not true.
Not true.
Yeah.
What
do you think it is?
So I used to think it was 15 to 20%. I think today it's a little bit more than that.
Wow.
And I'm now hearing people get a little bit more religion around this. Now, nobody has a real quantifiable number, but I will tell you, I was in Illinois 4 weeks ago, and I was walking down the street, and we walked by a hemp store.
Yeah.
It was a pop-up hemp store. You walked in, there was no age gating, there was no security. It looked like a regular store. They were selling homemade brownies, homemade pies. In fact, they had a brand that was modeled after a big MSO brand. I won't say which one it was. And when I said to the guy, I think this is copyright infringement, he chuckled and he said, I'll keep doing it until they send me the cease and desist order.
Correct.
No kidding.
Frank said that. Frank was saying that he was down in Key West, which on Duval, there's a Sunburn, a CURLF, and I'm pretty sure a Move. And he said right next to all of them is a hemp dispensary that says medical, no medical card required, deli-style THCA flower, all the edibles, everything. And what Frank said that resonated, and I'm very guilty of doing this, I think in terms of the way that I see things, especially products with cannabis, I always go straight for, I'm not price sensitive, I buy whatever I want. He says hemp makes just enough sense to the bottom of that spectrum that purchases cannabis, that it's more convenient, distribution model is way more convenient, they don't really care about the risk, and they're willing to go over there and buy it. So
There's
I think
a lot.
you're probably correct. It's probably close to between.
There's a lot of
30 and
Americans that
40%.
think like that too, right?
Right, but also the consumer doesn't know the difference.
Exactly.
The consumer walks into that hemp store that I was talking about, and
They
they
say
know
weed.
it's
Yeah.
legal in Illinois, and they see weed, they see THC, and they put in the same exact category. They don't know the difference between hemp and cannabis.
None.
There's
Especially
no
for people that
education
don't
there.
understand or don't follow this industry at all.
Right.
I got constant people asking me all the time, is this stuff okay to buy? And I just said, I understand that what you're buying hasn't been tested. I don't give a shit. And it's just like, well, a good point by Frank. Are we watching this or fixated too much on the research, development, and the labeling and the testing and all that? It is important, but are we maybe a little too sensitive for people that follow this industry that pertain to this?
I don't think so. What I'm about to say, I have no evidence for, so I'm hesitating, but I will say it anyway. anecdotally, I seem to be seeing more and more articles and stories about people showing up in the emergency room with cannabis-related issues. Well, does it coincide over the last 2 years with the proliferation of hemp products?
It does.
That now that we're seeing the testing occur and we're seeing what's in some of this product, I have to believe it occurs. It would be great if the health department required hospitals, when somebody came in with a cannabis issue, to identify, where did they buy the product? I think that's really difficult. It's a little pie in the sky. But anyway, my point is, I think the industry is getting painted with this elevation these elevated levels of hospital visits, and it's really probably the hemp market than it is the cannabis
That's
market.
been my number one objection to the hemp industry at large. It is a threat to the state-run industry in that sense. If a child smokes a vape, eats an edible, does whatever, NBC6, CNN, Laura Ingraham, who just ran a crazy piece on cannabis prohibition, there is no point of differentiation between, is it a hemp product or did they go buy it at Move?
Right.
Zero. It's cannabis. We're all getting blamed no matter what.
Yeah. And when you see clips,
they're not even the ones paying 280E and following the regulations.
And when you see a lieutenant governor like Dan Patrick say what he said, and no media members to push back because they don't understand, what's the lasting impression going to leave behind, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, Patrick was the worst thing possible. He said, this THC can kill you. This THC, I approve the expansion of the program in the state of Texas. They're both the same THC. They were both Delta-9, naturally derived THC. He completely contradicted himself.
Yeah.
That news conference was the best thing that we could have possibly had and the worst thing that he could have actually done.
Yeah. Good point.
It showed how.
Want to get your other opinion. We had Boris Jordan on recently, a company you work with, CURLF, announced that he's splitting basically his dispensary into a hemp store. I'm assuming, obviously, you know a lot of this stuff, but what did you think of that strategy? Because it was something that caught our attention, to say the least, but always innovative with what he's doing.
I think if you have the capital to be able to do it, I think you should be putting a toe in that market because you just don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And if the Farm Bill loophole isn't closed and there is a regulatory structure that gets put in place for hemp and there's a massive market, boy, it would be foolish if at the beginning or near the beginning you didn't take the opportunity.
Yep.
Now, the problem is not everybody has the capital availability to take some of their capital and put it over towards hemp. It's not a small investment. I mean, it's small for them in the context. So I think it's smart, but not everybody has the ability to do it.
Is there a lot of red tape involved in doing something like that? You know, of like...
I mean, you're taking a dispensary offline if you're using pre-existing real estate. So, I mean, there's obviously an ebb and flow. But, I mean, if I was one of the operators, which I'm assuming they did, you take an underperforming asset, retrofit it to hemp, it's low CapEx, figure out how to make the most dollars per square feet that's in that location, and just extract data. Figure out data from the consumers, test products, test just tons of different processes that you can't with the medical dispensary in Florida. Right now they have open foot traffic whenever they want. You don't need a medical card. There's no barrier to entry to go in that store. When we had Seth on and I went through the rationale, that store on Clematis, he's got Sunburn and Move right down the street. He's got a hemp dispensary on the other side of him. And then he's got a CureLeaf that's 6 miles away in Palm Beach Gardens. So that dispensary right there made a ton of sense to do a pilot and test in that location. It's a very specific thing to do. Do I think they should probably take half their footprint and start to retrofit it into hemp dispensaries? No. The co-location, though, is interesting. Because if he co-los them, he can do straight data-driven studies on the traffic, on who's buying what, and seeing, hey, if someone's coming in to buy a CureLeaf hemp product, whether it's a beverage or an edible, can I convert them into the medical dispensary? Or are they willing to convert into the medical dispensary because I built up the brand trust, now are they going to buy my flower? I don't think you're going to get that crossover per se, but he has the ability now to do it. I think it's very interesting what he's doing with hemp.
Yeah, I think it's worth it to make that experiment and try it.
Understanding consumer trends, right?
For sure. I mean, that's the business they're in. So they should be trying different things. And again, I come back to capital. For them, they have the ability to make that investment and test it and see where it goes without risking the rest of the business. Creating optionality for the future is a positive thing for shareholders.
You been following PA at all?
Can you say again?
Have you been following the developments, the PA and the Senate? They're in session this week, so we'll have Michael Bronstein back on from Attach on Wednesday to get an update. But
Love Michael,
yeah, isn't he great as far as some of the dialogue? Like whether you he speaks the truth, and he's like, I'm on the front lines, just giving you the information from what I see and learn. It's not about me speculating. That's what I like. But will this bill be proposed? Yes, it has been. And what are we going to work out from here? But it'll be interesting to see what comes out of these hearings, but I'm sure you've been following it.
For sure. And again, I go back to politics. So what are the politics in Pennsylvania that can get this done? We all know the governor's put it in.
He wants something on his desk by the end of this month. So
and he's put it in the budget 2 times.
Yeah.
But yet, what are the Republicans in the state? What do they want to give this to him? He has to give something to them. Now,
hopefully it's the gaming that Michael talks about us all the
yeah,
time. Hopefully
there's
that's the
horse trading, and that's all those conversations are happening between the different sides.
We just need PA. We need PA to drop. We need a win.
The cart has left the station. Do people bet in Pennsylvania? Like, give it to them. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're. Isn't betting, sports betting, or any kind of betting, Pennsylvania is the biggest market outside of Nevada in the U.S.?
I'm not sure.
I don't know about
I'd have to guess Florida, New York, or Texas, just with the population density. But I have no idea.
Yeah,
there is lots of big arenas in there with the Sixers and stuff like that, and Eagles, where they actually have the sports betting. I think a former friend of mine told me how big that market was, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, we need new markets to go online. This isn't 2018 to 2021, but be nice to see PA. We need some
it would be nice
positive news.
Yeah, it would be nice to see PA. I don't want to get excited about it. I don't want people to get excited about it because
paper.
This is the Charlie Brown scene where Lucy holds the football.
I get it.
We're used to getting Schumered. Yeah.
Exactly, right? You were talking about that with Frank earlier, getting Schumer. That was the analogy we always used. With Pennsylvania, politics. The good news for the industry is they have a budget deficit.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to find some way to fill that gap. Given what's happening at the federal level, I think they're going to see some growing deficits around Medicaid as well.
Neighboring states.
Reimbursements. So like all the pieces are there.
Yeah, I know.
What does that horse trade result in?
All right, so Rab, let's bring this all together then. You're here for another day tomorrow?
Yeah, all day tomorrow and leave Wednesday.
Wednesday? Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the big takeaway then? I know we talked about this at the top, but if you had to give our viewers who are watching this right now, what's the big takeaway for you here on day one?
I'd say there's a lot of work being done here. There's a lot of work being done to figure out the path forward. Now I'm going to tell you something a little hokey. I've noticed more Blazers at this conference than I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think what that means, not necessarily
Blazers with no hoodies or just Blazers? Because I think just the Blazers is a good thing.
Just the Blazers, even ones with the hoodies. But I think what that's saying is it's not that there's a lot of people here with capital to be done, but there's a lot of people here who came ready to have a conversation with a banker who's traditionally wearing something like this, or maybe there are a couple of capital providers in the crowd. But what I'm seeing so far here on day one is a lot of conversation about how do we set the table for this next phase of the industry.
Yeah, well said. Also want to say a special hello to a big fan of yours is my daughter. She's actually here in Chicago because last time we were here, obviously I was in a meeting and I got, had to rush to the hospital because my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, but she's doing great.
I'm so
She's here with mom and grandma this week here in Chicago.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
She's going to be swinging by here, so I'll make sure she says hello. She's a big
Please
fan,
do.
all right?
Oh, that's great. She's
all right.
awesome.
And then proud new dad. How's the little one going? Awesome?
Fantastic. She's sleeping. That's all I care about.
That's awesome.
Sleeps.
Take it while you get it.
Yeah. Well, listen, this recaps day one here in Chicago. I hope you guys all got a big takeaway, but work is being done. A lot of suits in the crowd right now, as Anthony said. And let us know, leave your comments below. Give us some feedback on what you thought of today's interviews and any other questions that you want to learn. More importantly, too, right now, 20% of our subscribers, or I should say the people that consume our content each month, are subscribers, 80% are not. So if you get a chance, make sure to subscribe with us here at the TDR Trade to Black podcast. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. And thanks for checking into our all-day live stream here today. For Anthony, and myself, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
So, what'd you think of all that information? Some interesting stuff that we just learned once again here at the TDR Trade to Black podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. As usual, if you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone.